Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, my God. It's big, so strong, so mighty. My God's plans for me goes beyond my wildest dreams. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do.
Well, welcome to Wellness Issues. I'm your host, Chris Sylvain, and we're totally excited today about today's show. It's one that I've been thinking about for a very, very long time, just some of the concepts and, of course, wellness issues. We speak about wellness of the mind, wellness of the body, wellness of the spirit of the individual, but also wellness of the community. How can we have wellness of an individual without having wellness of the community? So today, again, we're focusing on things that affect us individually and also affects the community. And we have an awesome guest here today. He's actually Dr. Mack Crayton III. He holds a B.S. degree in biology from the University of Louisiana at Monroe, a master's degree in biology from Tennessee State in Nashville, and also a Ph.D. In genetics from the University of Connecticut. We had him on before with health issues, and so exciting then. So we're excited to have him today. Welcome, Dr. Crayton. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling blessed. Thank you for having me today.
Hey, well, we're excited to have you right here in the studio with us. And so what we're talking about today, the concept of genetics, and we've been dealing with mass incarceration. That's been the focus. We feel that's the most important thing. But when we look at mass incarceration, the reason that it is an issue is because it's dealing with African-American men. And, if they were incarcerated in all races, then we can still talk about it, but which makes it an issue is African-American men. And so we look historically, we keep dealing with this issue of race. So, hey, let's go straight to the facts, and we go right to what really drives everything. This issue of race, give us some background on it. This concept of race, what's the difference between whites and blacks concerning I think the big issue we deal with is if blacks and whites mate, interracial marriage, dating, or whatever, the more it's much more likely for the offspring to be black. And give us some background.
Okay. In that respect, we're looking at traits that varying forms of a gene, which we call alleles. Okay. And those alleles can be dominant. Those that show themselves present in combination when there's a mixed combination, and then those that are recessive. Okay. Our civilization, as we learn from the Bible, as well as in science, originated in Africa. Okay. And so the darker traits that we have, dark eye color, dark brown eyes, dark brown black hair, darker skin, those are the dominant traits and the characteristic of the original people. Okay. So when we begin to have interracial matings today, we see that those darker traits will overshadow those lighter traits, which are the recessive traits.
That is amazing. We look back. Literally, so when we think about it, so if say I'm thinking about a old guy, and my daughter calls me old too, but I don't receive that at all. You know what I mean? But you think about your grandchildren and who they date. So if we think about somebody that's Caucasian, all right, yeah. Genes are recessive, yes, and their granddaughter dates this black guy. Guess who's coming to dinner? Okay. Yeah. All right, and this is his only grandchild. Yes. There's nobody else in the family to carry on this line, yes. And literally what he may see as his race would be wiped out.
Correct, in essence. So if that's his only grandchild, and then the lineage would be, according to society standards, would be changed from Caucasian to black.
Wow.
Okay. We look at through generation time. So it's almost within one generation, as we were saying, with interracial marriages, as we define what is black and what is white. You can go from being a white family to a black family in just one generation with one mating. Evolutionarily, as we mentioned, that civilization started with black people, it took about 20,000 years to go from black to white, and that was a part of the migration and migration around the world, and the adaptation to the different climates, which actually drives our physical appearance, is the adaptation to our climates as humans migrated or populated the earth.
Okay, so as people began in Africa, and as they move forward into the cold climates, less sunlight, and so forth, the adaptation to that end up being lighter skin.
Correct. It was biologically driven. So in Africa, where you're closer to the equator, you're getting more sunlight, more UV exposure. The melanin in our skin, which is a protein that gives you the color, the dark color, was there as a protective mechanism. Protect from UV radiation, of course, from cancer, skin cancer, but also protects our folic acid, which helps in the development process of the fetus when the woman is pregnant and preventing birth defects. And so you have healthier babies by having that darker skin if you are in high-intensity UV. As individuals left Africa and moved into Europe in exploration, and these were early humans, there was a need for the skin to gradually lighten because there was less light exposure. But you do need UV light to activate vitamin D, which will give you healthy bones and the formation of calcium. So there was an advantage at that point. As you move away from the equator and you're in colder climates and there's less sunlight, there's a need for lighter skin so that you can metabolize that vitamin D.
Okay, so, and also that's amazing, because vitamin D is the hottest subject in nutritional sciences right now. What came first, the need for vitamin D or whatever. But the thinner noses, the shape, the way fat is distributed throughout the body, the coarseness of the hair. Help me on that one.
Okay, correct. Again, to adapt to those climates, and as again over time, we find that people who were better adapted survived and had more children, and then their children would show those traits. If you're moving to a colder climate, there's a need for a narrow nasal passage and a longer nasal passage. So you would see more of a protruding nose for people who are of European descent. That's allowed the warming and moisturizing of the air, the cold, dry air. It becomes moist and warm as it passes through that long nasal passage and reaches the lungs, rather than that cold air hitting the lungs.
Right.
And so if you have a broad nasal passage and you've ever gone jogging or something up north and you hit that air and it like burns your lungs when you go in, the nasal passage is not as long, and there's less time to cool warm that air. Additionally, with the nasal passage, we have the hairs in there, which we call cilia, and that filters out some of the pathogens that we would have. If you are in that colder climate, in that shorter passage, you're more likely to get colds and catch the flu because your nasal passage is short if you have a broad nose. Right. And so you're taking in that air without enough filtration going on there. And so whereas when you're in the warmer climate, your cilia or the hairs are able to better filter that. So there are a lot of small, minute things that helps you with your adaptation and living in those climates. And therefore, those people who were adapted better had more children, and their children then passed on those traits, and they became better refined.
Our people perish for a lack of knowledge.
Exactly. In terms of the hair, as we look at individuals in Africa who have shorter, coarser hair, or curly hair, as we say, very tightly coiled hair, in that area you would sweat quite a bit. And as the sweat would evaporate, if you didn't have a way to retain that water, you would dehydrate and eventually die. And so for coarse, short hair, you hold water. The hair holds the water and moisture longer, keeping the body cool and keeping you from overheating and dehydrating. As compared to a colder climate where there's straight hair dries quickly. And therefore, if the individuals, if their hair got wet, the hair would dry quickly to prevent the freezing of the head in those colder climates.
And that's why I can't send my daughters out to go swimming if they just got their hair done.
It takes a long time for your hair to dry.
For the ladies out there,
they understand.
It's so amazing. All right, now, muscle fibers, and genetics, and this concept of fast twitch, slow twitch fibers of white men can't dance.
Okay. Again, evolutionarily, depending on where you lived and what you had, your climate, so whether you're on flat land or mountainous or sloped land, will develop muscles and also will give you the advantage to, at that time, to get away from the predators. So if you were living in the tribal communities and you were going into the jungles, of course, there were the lions and tigers and things, and you had to have mechanism to escape. And so those particular traits were passed to their children. Historically, and then as, again, you moved to Europe, there were different types of environmental issues you were dealing with, and those that were better suited for that. And so now, in present society, we would look at, well, what is our ancestry? And because we still have pretty much selective mating, meaning that you tend to marry and have children within your ethnic group, you're passing on those traits from your original ancestors. As we see interracial or biracial individuals, then they have a mixing of those traits. And then you can see features from both ethnic groups in that one individual.
Great. That is absolutely amazing in and of itself because, again, evolution, the passing on of genes. And so short distance runners, many times we see, African-American, not African-American, whatever, I mean, regardless. But then in long distance runners, and it has a lot, and it can affect adaptation. Skin color in and of itself, though, because the biology of race, sometimes can we have, not use, because, well, anyway, help me out.
Okay.
All right. There can be people that have African traits, all right, and have lighter skin colors, and vice versa. Can it? But not often. Help me understand that. A lot of times people look at the relevance of race, but I say that race is relevant. It's just that you can't quantify it on character.
Correct. Skin color is one of those complicated forms of heredity, and so there are multiple genes that are involved, probably 8 or 9 genes that we believe, and we call this quantitative inheritance. And so what you get is a scale of skin colors. It's very hard to find someone who's your exact skin tone, and that's the issue ladies face when they're trying to get their foundation, and they're at the cosmetic counter. What is your skin color? So what we have these set of 9 genes that are all contributing to produce a particular color. So the more recessive alleles or forms of those 9 genes you have, the lighter your skin would be. The more dominant you have for that set of 9, the darker your skin would be. And so you fall somewhere on that scale based upon the number of dominants and recessives that you would have. So an individual who could be of your family self-identifies as of African descent or African American, but you could have more recessive alleles that gives you the complexion of a Caucasian person. So we often see that with biracial individuals. We, for example, we could look at the celebrity Mariah Carey. If you didn't know Mariah, you probably at a glance would say she's a Caucasian woman. But she self-identifies as African American because of her, I think she has a father who's African American. So it depends on the individual. And by the same token, we can look at some individuals who are darker complected. There are some Indian individuals from India who are darker or as dark as many African Americans. And so based upon complexion, you would say, okay, well, this person's African, or if you just saw a swatch of skin. But then the social norm comes in to say, you belong to a particular ethnic group. And so that's a social construct that we have as far as placing people into a particular ethnic group. and thus we say, how do you self-identify?
Ah, wow.
As black, white, Asian, Hispanic.
Okay, we need a TV. I mean, this needs to be. I mean, we have the people. People have to be educated. Oh,
Yes,
wow.
yes.
All right, and let's go to. Let's move it to World War I, World War II. Okay, and Germany. I saw an article the other day of should Mein Kampf or whatever be re-released into the German culture again. They had, after Hitler, Germany totally attempted to wash all of that out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But recognizing though that there is still today, David Duke, he almost won the governor's race, and so this concept though. But behind all of that is a view of genetics that says that African admixture reduces a race because of the difference. Now the counter was race is irrelevant, that we're all the same, we can all run the same, we can do this, but the truth of the matter is there are differences. And so how do we put those two together? Because Jimmy the Greek, who was that got fired because he said that black kids can run faster? Or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, but I mean, there may have been truth in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he got fired for saying it.
Correct.
I don't know. Help me out.
Okay. That movement in the time of World War I, World War II, and with Hitler and early geneticists in the United States, because Hitler got his information from American geneticists, who at that time was a predominantly white field of study. Where the scientists were all white. And so we called that area of genetics actually eugenics. Right. And so it was a divisive form of science that did state that, or placed a hierarchy on ethnic groups and who was superior in intelligence as well as performance. And there were a lot of studies to see if the blacks and whites were actually of different species. And so they measured the brain and all body parts and gave these what was supposed to be IQ tests and made these declarations that blacks were genetically inferior in intellect based upon your test scores. And so we know that that's false testing or wrong practices, making that decision, one based upon exposure. And so the kids who took the test had not been exposed to the music and the art and the questions on the test for the blacks as compared to the whites who had been, and Asians had some exposure as well. Okay. So, of course, if you're exposed to it, you get the answer correct. Right. If you had not been. And so based upon that, they said, well, blacks are genetically inferior because you couldn't answer this question. And so and similar things were stated. It's interesting that we are, and as you mentioned, about muscle structure, body structure, it gives you a predisposition to be a better athlete depending on a particular body structure. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that whites can't have that body structure to be an Olympic sprinter. Right. I'm trying to recall the young man's name who was Caucasian and was a Olympic sprinter. So as well as you can have distant runners who are African American, where you tend to see, if you're watching track and field, usually the white guys are in the distance and then the black guys are sprinters. Right. And so it can be vice versa, depending on the structure that you've inherited. Okay. But the interesting thing that we're looking at, there's a new area and want to introduce to the public a term genomics. And so you may be hearing that come on the surface, and genome, Genome. So the genome is all of the DNA in the individual. Okay. And then the area of genomics is the study of all of the DNA. So that's our new area, and genomics is applied to medicine now. And so that's one of the things I want to share with you that ties into health issues, is that what we're doing now, or the medical field is starting to do, and it's on the cusp, and we're teaching that to our students at Xavier University. I have to give a plug to my university.
Right. I didn't say that. I thought Connecticut and everything. Oh, man, go Rush. All right, shoot.
Yeah, I'm a professor at Xavier University here in the city of New Orleans.
Yes.
And so We are personalized medicine or genomic medicine is looking at the DNA of an individual using that genetic information to determine clinical treatment for the patient. And so what we're seeing now that there are some differences in some genes between the different ethnic groups. So whether it's black, white, Asian, Hispanic, and so it's a caution in that we don't want to go back to eugenics and say there's a hierarchy. But what we are all one species. All humans are. We're all one species. We all have the same genes. But genes can have varying forms, so different forms. And so depending on your parentage, you've inherited a certain form. We see a certain form in a particular ethnic group because your family has pretty much been of that ethnic group and tend to marry and have children within your ethnic group. And so we're seeing one key, and I think an example is the use of a drug called warfarin or Coumadin, a blood thinner that many Americans are on to prevent blood clots, heart attack, and stroke. And so what we're looking at is there are genetic differences between African Americans and Caucasians and people of other groups. There are two different genes that should be tested before given a dosage. And so by testing that and looking at your genetic composition, which version of the gene you have determines what dose of that drug you should receive or whether you should not receive that drug. And so many of you who are out there who have family members or you yourselves are on the drug, you may find that you go back repeatedly over months and the doctors will adjust your dosage, and try to figure out what's the right amount for you. Ask them to do the genetic test. The genetic test will tell the doctor what is your correct dosage. And so that differs from ethnic group. So that's personalized medicine.
Oh, wow. Look, I'm about to shout right now. This is awesome. We have a caller, and we're so excited. Obviously, line 3, Brother Coleman, Monroe Coleman.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
The conversation, the subject matter is very interesting. I have a question. I heard something I want to see if it could be validated. Okay. The average white person has between 10 and 15% of black DNA. Is that true or not?
I don't have that particular percentage figure, but because we do have a mobile society, in particular in America, there's been such admixture from slavery and so forth on, where there were people who were at one time African descent, but through slavery and then selective matings of who they chose to have children with, they now identify as Caucasian. But you would be able to find some of those genes or traits that would be of African descent in them. So that's probably correct. I can't verify the percentage, but I would agree that all ethnic groups would have a mixture from another ethnic group.
And also that your DNA would determine your original, I guess we say, birth of origin.
Okay. You can. Actually, there are tests, and there's one that's very popular now called 23andMe, and it's about, don't want to really promote that or advertise, give them free advertisement, but it's one of the ones that's on the market. You can, they'll send you a swab and a Q-tip, and you will swab the inside of your mouth and send it off to them, and in a few months they'll send back you your genetic profile, and it can tell you what is your ancestry, how much African, Native American, Asian. Oprah Winfrey did a different type, and they had a TV series where there were several celebrities, Chris Tucker, Oprah Winfrey, Mae Jemison. Many of them had their ancestry, and they were able to actually go back to the tribe in Africa from which they descended. Wow. So you can, and based upon those abilities, we're having to rethink and restate, because when I was on your show last time, we said there's no biological basis for race. That's a social construct. But as we've gotten into the field of genomics, we realize there are some differences that allows you to identify individuals based upon their ethnic group, based on the DNA itself.
Okay, and also, and the research have determined that Africa nation, or the continent of Africa, is the birthplace of the world.
That is correct.
All right. That's what I want to hear, because that's what I've heard, and it goes back to the biblical term where the Garden of Eden was located up on the continent of Africa.
That is correct, and that's correct. And so from science, again, science can only observe what God has created, and science can only answer questions about what can be measured. And so as we look at the oldest fossil records of humans, they are found in an area of Africa that's near what the Bible describes to be the Garden of Eden. And so the science then corroborates what the Bible tells us.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much, Brother Coleman. Off the chain. I mean, that's really, really good. We have a couple of more minutes. There's a couple of things we want to throw out. The soft issues, of course, the hard issues of race and, skin tone and so forth. And we dealt with that the last time, but genetics and intellect, if we can just drive that real quick.
Okay. That's a hard one. That's a very hard one, and also a sticky issue. Intellect is based upon several things. And so one, of course, would be brain structure and the neurons that make up our brain. So neurons are the cells that make up your brain. It's believed during development, embryonic development, so while the woman's pregnant, we've been told that, or there's evidence that shows that playing music and speaking various language, if you're bilingual, that you speak both languages as while you're pregnant, and also while the fetus is a few months and so forth, it stimulates neuronal development. And so we believe that the more neurons you have, the more intelligent the individual will be. And then the use of illicit drugs and alcohols can inhibit those neuronal development, and therefore you have mentally disabled children based upon drug usage. So we see that. But also coming into play, as any teacher would tell you in the classroom, vision. So whether the kid can see the chalkboard or the whiteboard now, or the PowerPoint, whatever's playing, their ability to hear, so the hearing, all of these go into effect. And then we have the other kind of learning disorders, whether you're dyslexic and the like. So all of those things, the physical features and what structures go into proper eye formation and vision and hearing, those will all come into play when it comes to intellect. And then the other part about, I guess people say about 20% or 25% would be the social norm. How important is education to that particular family? How much is it emphasized? Because, of course, the more support you're given as a child to read and encouragement to read, particularly these summer months, so make sure your kids are reading and doing a little math. They keep those skills intact as compared to just kind of vegetating during the summer.
Okay. Yeah. But you answered it, but just to drive home, the ACT score issue is just major. I mean, you're talking about big points. It's not small amounts. We have major differences, and they're not explained by income or any other area. I mean, so obviously, if we look at Times-Picayune, you look at the comment section, on NOLA.com, and, the level of racism is unbelievable, as if black people are less intelligent. And but dealing with this issue of constantly being disenfranchised, does that lead to a child that has less potential?
Yes, and I think that's been shown back in the 40s, 50s with separate but equal. Okay. My parents lived through that, the Jim Crow laws, and you got secondhand books and outdated information. Okay. And so if the school system itself is not equipped, if you do not have teachers who are prepared to teach the students, then, of course, they're not going to perform well on those standardized tests.
But genetically, inherently.
But genetically, it does not mean that you do not have the ability.
All right.
Okay. All right. So it's about exposure at that particular point.
I am excited. Obviously, we're only touching the surface, so we have to come back again and literally again.
Would love to.
Yes, yeah. I mean, literally. I mean, if the world has changed, we have a new world, but we got to get out of here. I just got to put a plug for Best Life Pharmacy and Restaurant Tulane and Broad. Get your medicine delivered. Get your food delivered. 100% healthy food. Hey, fight as hard as you can. I'm out.
Searched all over, couldn't find nobody. I looked high and low, still couldn't find nobody. Nobody great.